What's growing on, gardeners? It's May, and things are heating up quickly here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. On today's video, I'm going to show you how to keep tree roots, moles, and voles out of your garden beds permanently and for nearly free. Let's get on with the show.
If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated.
Now, the reason why I am doing this specifically is to keep tree roots from invading my raised garden beds. But I'm also happy to report that this technique will work to keep moles, voles, and other tunneling or burrowing animals and pests out of your garden beds too. About 1 month ago, I showed you how I was going to use these inexpensive modular metal raised garden beds to place them in between my fruit trees and use this dead space in between to grow food underneath food and dramatically increase the output of my yard. And this has the potential to work brilliantly, but there is one small problem. You can't just drop a raised garden bed in between two trees and fill it up and get growing, because if you dig along the surface, what you will find is all of these roots from the trees growing along the surface. So if I were to just fill this bed with soil and get planting, these roots would eventually work their way into the garden bed and suck all the nutrients into the fertile soil and colonize that bed. So this just wouldn't work. You have to line the bottom of this raised bed with something in order to block these roots from intruding. Now, in my quest to find the perfect material to line the bottom of my raised beds, I considered many options. One option I considered was cardboard, because we know it's very popular for many gardeners to put down cardboard on the ground when they place a new raised bed. Well, cardboard is only good for snuffing out grass and nothing else, because when you place that cardboard and then you put a bed on top of it and fill it full of soil, all the grass underneath it will suffocate due to lack of air and light. And then the cardboard will break down in about 6 months, and because the grass is dead, no big deal. The roots inside the raised garden bed will reach the ground and penetrate into the native soil. Well, for trees, that's not going to work. That barrier made out of cardboard will be gone in no time, so as soon as the cardboard breaks down, the tree roots will just work their way in. This will not work. Another option I considered was plywood. I could buy a big sheet of plywood for not a lot of money, throw it on the ground, and place the raised bed right on top of that. Well, the plywood is probably going to break down in about 2 years or so, and then all the roots of the trees will just work their way in. So plywood, while it's better than cardboard, it's not a long-term solution, so that won't work either. The third option I considered was a big piece of sheet metal. Now, honestly, sheet metal would make the ultimate tree root barrier, and it would basically last forever. So that's great, but it has a number of downsides. Number one, I looked up the prices of sheet metal, and a piece of sheet metal long enough for the raised bed actually costs more than the raised bed itself. So it's very expensive. A second downside is, if you put sheet metal under your raised bed, you are basically turning it into a container garden. It's not going to allow good drainage anymore. And because I get such heavy rain in the summer, I really need my raised beds to drain very well for the thunderstorm issue. So that option was out. And in addition, because that is a metal garden bed, if I were to buy a piece of sheet metal, I would probably have a dissimilar metals contact issue. When you place two metals that are different alloys or different types together and they touch, the ionic exchange actually causes corrosion. So that is a zinc galvanized raised bed. If I put it up against aluminum or stainless steel or iron or something, it would actually cause a corrosive effect. So it would ruin my raised beds. So for those three reasons, metal was out. Then I considered pavers, concrete blocks, and bricks. And again, this would be quite expensive to buy all of these concrete items. Also, where the bricks or the pavers meet, they would have gaps where roots would eventually intrude. So for those reasons, that was out. So after a lot of thought, I decided that the best thing to use to line the bottom of my raised beds is the stuff that I already use everywhere around my yard and garden anyway, and that is weed barrier. It's dirt cheap, it's lightweight, it's easy to install, it lasts a very long time, the material drains so the raised bed will percolate properly just like it's designed to do, and it is actually designed to keep roots out and to snuff things out. So this should work very well. Now, granted, this stuff is mainly used for grasses and things that don't have roots as pernicious as fruit trees, but all we really have to do is double it up. We'll just apply 2 layers instead of 1, and that should be more than enough protection to make sure that I don't have any issues with roots ever intruding my raised garden beds. Now, like I said, I use this weed barrier stuff everywhere throughout my yard, and the weed barrier here is 6 years old and it still works great. So I have a long history with this stuff. I know how well it works, and it's so cheap. It costs pennies per square foot. So since that little raised garden bed is only 8 square feet, I mean, we're talking about a negligible amount of money to actually line the bottom. It may cost $1, probably less if you buy a big reel of it. So if you're curious where I get my weed barrier, what I use, I will place direct links down in the video description for your convenience if you want to get some of the stuff. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull back all of the mulch that I have, and we are going to use the back side of the rake because we don't want to damage any of those surface roots from the fruit trees that are currently running along the surface. Then once we have all of the mulch pulled back, we are going to use the back side of the rake to level out the area so we have a reasonably flat surface to put our new raised bed. So now we have the raised bed garden on a level surface exactly where we want it. Now we have to cut to length the weed barrier. And this part couldn't be any easier and more straightforward. Just roll out your weed barrier and then place the raised bed on top of it, and then cut a larger piece with a pair of scissors. Now, I'm actually using a used piece of weed barrier that I had down on the ground for a few years. So because of that, it has a few holes in it from garden staples. So because it has a few holes in here, I think I'm actually going to triple up the weed barrier instead of doubling it up. If it's brand new weed barrier, I think a double shot may be enough. But again, this stuff is so cheap that it's probably not going to hurt you to even put down 3 layers just to be on the safe side. See, there's layer 1, there's layer 2 underneath. So we'll have a nice bottom here where no tree roots will get through, but all the water will still drain and percolate through the woven weed barrier. So now the raised garden bed is in place and I have all of the weed barrier down underneath. I actually went with a triple layer of weed barrier, and that's because this weed barrier is used. I previously had it down in my garden, so it had some holes in it from the landscaping staples, so I wanted to be sure that nothing would get through. Now, what's awesome about this weed barrier is it will keep out tree roots, but it will also prevent things like moles and voles from breaking through. So if you have issues with moles and voles, you'll get a side benefit. And because it is woven, it will let all the water percolate through, so the raised bed will function as designed. And now I'm going to fill the raised bed with a 50-50 mix of locally made topsoil and compost. If you want to know why I use this as a mix, I'll link a video down in the video description that explains exactly why. This is one of the best and most affordable ways to fill a raised bed. And here is the raised bed. It has been filled and the mix has been thoroughly combined and everything is looking great. Now you will notice that I do have the weed barrier that is visible in the front, around the sides, and in the back. So we want to cover that up with some mulch. So I have some old wheat straw left over from the previous fall that I was using to insulate my banana plants. So I will drag that over and I will place wheat straw around the whole area and bury that weed barrier. And here is the final product. We covered up all of that weed barrier with the wheat straw, so anybody would be none the wiser. We don't even know it's there. So we will protect this raised bed from any root intrusion, as well as from any moles or voles, and everything looks great and natural. Now I'm going to give this raised bed garden about 1 to 2 weeks to settle, and then I'm going to plant some watermelon in it. So stay tuned for a watermelon planting video. And that is a cheap, easy, nearly free way to prevent tree roots from intruding in your raised garden bed, as well as keeping out things like moles and voles. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring that notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I use in real life in my garden, or you want to know where I got things like these raised garden beds or weed barrier, I will place direct links down down in the video description. For your convenience and for everything else I use in my garden in real life, I'll link to them all in my Amazon storefront link in the video description. So expand the video description, you will find all of the links that you need. And while you're down there, please check out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video.
So for those of you that don't know, Dale is a very deep-chested dog, and deep-chested dogs are prone to bloat if they eat too quickly, and bloat is fatal in dogs. So we have to feed Dale in one of these slow feeder bowls that have all of these grooves melded into it. That way you can press the food in there and it will force him to eat more slowly. Well, many years ago, we converted all of the foodstuffs, like the storage and the pots and pans in our house, to either glass or stainless steel. The only exception was Dale's plastic slow feeder bowls, and unfortunately the stainless steel slow feeder bowls, they usually just have an indentation or two in them. They're not very effective. We need a groove design like this. So we got the next best thing, which is ceramic. So we found this ceramic slow feeder bowl, and it's heavy, but it is absolutely beautiful. So it just came out of the dishwasher. It's nice and clean. You can see the groove design. So we're gonna try it today for the first time ever. You see how it slows him down? He struggles to get his whole mouth in there and gulp the food. And that's what we need to make sure that Dale doesn't eat too fast and he stays a healthy dog for as long as possible. If you're interested in this bowl, I'll link to it down in the video description and put it in my Amazon store under Dale's favorite things. It is really beautiful, and apparently it works pretty well.